name?
So I'm here with Stephen Johnson Leyba, a good friend of mine, a famous painter, and oddly sort of a hobnobber of such, you know, like he's of sorts, you know, a lot of people that a lot of people know. So if you kind of sit over here with me here.
I like to talk
So how
people.
about you tell me a thing or two, like date of birth?
I'm going to tell you a thing or two. I was born in 1966. Ain't no satanist. First year of the satanic calendar. The first year of the coyote calendar. And I just turned 55. And fuck Denny's and their shitty ass fucking senior meal. I was born in Whittier, California. Check this out. I mean, about the time I was born in Whittier, California, and they call that Nixon land, even though he was from the next town over. When I was born, it was all oranges. Kid you not. Orchards. For like hundreds of miles. When I was a kid.
Okay, like, so you were a lad of, what, like 6 at this time? 10?
No, I was born in 1966.
Okay.
But when I left California to move to Arkansas, because my stepdad got a job, that was 10.
That actually explains a lot, actually, because you don't come off like a California, like, limp-wristed, kind of wussy type.
Tutti fucking fruity?
No, there is a lot of Arkansas in you. You have that Arkansas audacity.
And it's more and more coming out.
Right, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I miss the South.
Because if you were a true Californian, I don't think we'd get along. I don't even understand how you'd like anybody from California, but...
My friends are not like liberal authoritarians. They're not right-wing nuts or left-wing nuts. They're just not even swing nuts. They're the whole damn bird. I was taught to question authority. My father, Crazy Benny, said, do whatever you want. Don't get caught. Try everything, anything, you know? Yeah.
Right.
Right? Like,
so, but you've met a lot of pretty influential people that will and are remembered post-mortem. Like, they live beyond death. Like Anton LaVey, you're basically ordained by Anton LaVey, the original, the very first Church of Satan, the very first legally codified satanic church. And can you tell me a little bit tell us about your experience in meeting and knowing Anton LaVey?
Yes. First off, you say influential, and I need to tell people that I'm the last of the Mohicans. Sorry, I'm not Mohican. I'm Apache, Navajo, Cherokee, Paiute. But influential is one thing, because we're in the age of influencers. But I'm a descendant of masters, so Giger, LaVey, Genesis P-Orridge. I'm not Burroughs. These are masters of their own destiny.
Yeah, and these are all people that I know that he's met. Like, I've seen footage of that many times, actually.
They were actual friends that I spent time with. Especially Giger. I would see him like every couple of years. I would go to Switzerland. So with LaVey, when I started investigating my heritage, Native American, specifically like, you know, United States, North America, which is like I'm like a indigenous mutt. You know, I have some Welsh, English, Irish, Spanish, Jewish, but primarily Paiutes, Apache, Cherokee, Navajo. So I was getting a lot of criticism in art school in San Francisco, and it was like 1989, 90. So I sent some slides to LaVey, and I was like, hey, you know, would go back and forth from a fine art school to a commercial art school because I didn't want to be one of those artists that had a problem with making money. I'm like, money isn't a tool. So I'm like, I wrote a physical letter and sent some slides, which nobody does now, and got a letter back from Blanche, LaVey's partner, and she's like, well, maybe you just haven't found your audience, but maybe now you have found your audience. The doctor would like to meet and pick your brain. So, I'm still in art school. I didn't have any money. They're like, well, meet us, this Blanche and LaVey, at MacArthur Park Restaurant in San Francisco. And it was like, wow, that's pretty expensive, but I'll just have my rent money and whatever. Right, so I go, and I gave him a sculpture that I made. And the thing that impressed me about him, he was fucking hilarious. Like, my fucking family. Like, my dad, like, oh my God, he had the, like, fucking Jewish, Indian fucking humor. It was fucking goofy.
Well, the Jewish culture actually produces the best comedians, really. And I never knew if that was specifically because it was Jewish, or because, because, I'm from New York, like, and there's a lot of, like, Italian and Jewish influence, and both of those groups of people have a lot of wit, and they have, like, a very aggressive form of humor that's like, you know what, fuck you, like...
Right, and especially, like, the New York Jewish...
Yeah. But really, anybody who was born in New York and spent, their formative years in New York is going to have an attitude, because the New York attitude, and this isn't just New York City, it's New York in general, at least anybody of wit, they're going to have a combination between the fighting, fire in the belly Irish, and they're going to have the whole, like, bordering on dangerous Italian thing. Talking with your hands and shit. And I don't mean mafioso, by the way.
That could get
you would have to understand.
That could get you in a lot of trouble.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Waving your hand in somebody's face.
Right. Yeah. Well, anywhere else.
Get about it.
Outside
Get
that.
about it.
But like,
fuck Brooklyn.
And then you have the kvetching.
Never wounded knee.
You have the kvetching of the Jewish culture, which is like this very comical and aggressive form of bitching, which I think you do have. And you're not a New Yorker. You're definitively not a New Yorker. But you could be an honorary New Yorker. You just need to talk with your hands more.
I know, right? Like, but I left art school. I had not graduated from my illustration program at the Academy of Art College, and I fucking just moved to New York. I was working for Marvel doing horror comics for Clyde Barker. I had a career as an illustrator in my 20s, so it's
that's
like
very suitable for your line of work. Like, but, do you think that like? Did working with Clyde Barker, like, did he have some sort of influence on you? Like, were you just drawn to him for...
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I started going, before I started working for Marvel, Clyde Barker, and Eclipse Comics, doing Clyde Barker stuff, I started hanging out with the fucking horror writers at the horror conventions, like in San Jose, California. And I realized that they're all Jesus freaks. And
Really?
Stephen King too, yeah. And
Wow.
and Stephen King called it. He said horror is a Republican in a three-piece suit. And he's right.
How did he? What did he mean by that? I mean, you seem to have some sort of understanding about
the
that,
history
right?
of horror, at least in the United States, is very right-wing. Read the book. Read the book. Dance Macabre. Actually, you should listen to it on
well, is
books
there anything?
On tape.
Okay. But what I would ask is there anything that would be like more known, like in film form, that would be a good demonstration of that? Like, just because people don't read, they're fucking retards.
With Clyde Barker, he was the secular. It wasn't like. And I hated that because I moved to the South from California.
And he's a homosexual. Right? Am I wrong?
Yeah, like one time I went on his...
See, I didn't know that.
You didn't know that? I knew
until
that.
You told me.
I knew that, and I stumbled on his Tumblr back before Tumblr censored erotic images, and I'm like, Clyde Barker's sucking 50 dicks.
Jesus.
I know, I was jealous, and I said, hey, if you need another one, I'm there.
Okay.
But so Okay, so you saw my documentary on me that Mark Rokoff did, Unspeakable, right, in 2002?
Yeah.
Right?
I did not.
So Mark was supposed to interview Clyde Barker, right? And then he was faxing back and forth from his assistant, and I said, Mark. And Mark's a New York Jew. Great guy.
Right.
And he's gay. I said, Mark, please. Clive Barker is a businessman, and Satanism is not good for business if you say you're a Satanist. If you do satanic horror films, that's one thing. Please don't ask him any fucking questions about Satanism. And then the Clyde Barker's assistant said, please send us the questions. And he had like 3 questions about Satanism. I'm like, look, Clive Barker's his own fucking deal. Do not ask him about Satanism. He doesn't want to like preach religion. He's secular. He doesn't.
I didn't even know he was a Satanist.
He's not.
Okay, well then, yeah.
No,
why would you ask him satanic
yeah,
questions?
exactly.
That doesn't make sense.
What I'm saying is secular. He's not like, you know, Christian, Satanist, whatever.
Well, would you consider yourself secular at all?
That's a good question. I consider myself a Satanist, but I consider myself an animist Satanist, which, as far as I know, I don't think anybody else is. I believe rocks, trees, plants, everything's connected. We're all connected. Animist, that is like the unique religion, if you want to call it that, of North America. People don't talk about this. I studied anthropology. It's a very unique religion for the indigenous people of this continent. And there's, you know, animists all over the world, but it's like you can't find a godhead in any of the tribes of the United States. I'm not familiar with Canada. So the only thing that looks like a god is Wakantankan, the Sioux, the red-faced Wakantankan. So you have creation stories, but they're not to be taken literal. Metaphors. The indigenous people of the United States did not have gods. There were forces, entities, mythology, but they didn't worship them. They showed adoration for these symbols that they believed in, whether they
they saw themselves in these a lot of times.
Exactly, and that's the thing that people miss.
So they were related to it rather than like. I would imagine you probably understand what I mean when I say like. I think that there may be some pretty good things about Christianity, but I think apart from like the whole homophobic shit and you know the anti-LGBT thing, I think the biggest part of it, that the most salient point to the biggest flaws to Christianity would be that they separate God from nature and they separate us from nature.
Right, because
and that's
the
not,
wilderness.
That's not conducive to mental health or happiness.
Well, it was the enemy. Like, nature was evil, right? So it was the opposite of what the people of this continent believed. So they're like, oh, your whole belief of being part of nature, it's evil. You're evil. And if you look at the early depictions of hell, they're all like frozen wastelands. So when the devil turned red, it's because of Native Americans and Native, like, Canadians.
I heard about that. Is that's circa what, like 19th century?
That sounds about right. I'm not sure.
Okay,
Yeah,
it sounds like a 19th century thing. But,
right. So like Red Devil. Okay, well I'm part of Apache. They have the crown dancers. Some people still call it the devil dancers. The ceremony was outlawed till 1932 because here are these scary, like, you know, people wearing these like weird headdresses dancing around the fire from dusk to dawn to honor like a puberty rite for young girls for the rite of passage, which there's no rite of passage for young women or young men in America. So we're also looking at
don't you think that might play into the fact of like perpetual arrested development of an entire culture? Forever 21. Forever 21.
Right.
Isn't that fucking creepy?
I always hang out there at the mall, especially in Salt Lake City. If anyone wants to, I'll see you there.
No, but don't you think that there's something
it's intentional,
insidious about that?
It's intentional, yeah. If there's a word worse than insidious, and I don't like to use the word evil because it sounds like a fucking comic book word. Like, we need a better word.
Yeah,
So,
and I think evil actually had some salient points, but we corrupted the word. You know what I mean?
but it's cartoony.
It's
Like Marvel Comics.
Right.
Evil.
Right.
I'm evil.
Right.
I'm
right.
evil, Drive.
And that's actually what you're saying, is you're flipping off a lot of the same establishments
Right.
that Friedrich Nietzsche did. And I
That's-
know I'm not going to get
That's
into
why
that,
they
but
don't like me. That's why.
they didn't like Nietzsche either.
But
Right.
we're at a time where the powers that be, that are really pulling the strings, we don't know who they are. Call them what you want. You know, but our politicians and leaders, they're fucking cheerleaders. So somebody like me, who does, as a Renaissance man, paint, write, you know, I work with musicians, you know, I travel around, I show up. So yeah, so before I moved to New York, I was like, I wanted to meet LaVey. He was a big influence. I'm like, you're a big influence. I wasn't like, I need a leader. And he saw me as a peer. Burroughs saw me as a peer. And Giger saw me as a peer. And Genesis P-Orridge, who had like a friendship.
Yeah, and you
for
guys can
quite
actually
a while.
look this up, by the way, because all of this footage of them two, you know, all the people you're hanging out, like, all that's online.
Yep, Stephen Leyba at U2. So what I'm saying is, I mean, like, it's like a shameful thing. It's like being famous doesn't mean anything. There's no integrity in the age of social media. It's made everybody a politician.
Sure.
And they don't come up with the goods. They don't,
Right,
you're
right.
a fucking master fucking composer, you know, and you're competing with, like, I don't know, like
Cardi
Susie
B or whatever.
Susie Blueberry from fucking Montana, who's like dancing in her fucking underwear.
Right, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing.
Well,
Not saying it's a good thing.
It is discouraging, because I remember, like, we obviously, you know, we both have artistic backgrounds. Yours is visual, mine is musical. But there is some overlap, and there's a lot of discouragement to be seen about. You know, like, you have a lot of kitsch that is getting a lot more attention, and it's like, it does sometimes. And I know you actually, with a lot of
I hate
negative,
that
a lot
kitsch.
of a negative.
Fuck you, kitsch.
Right.
Who needs it?
And a lot of negative things that you see in culture, you have a tendency to believe that they're intentional, which I can understand, because it almost seems too insidious to not be.
Well,
you know?
it's glamour magic. And glamour magic, I have a problem with.
It's the most
A lot
shallow
of the time, yeah,
magic.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you're wasting your powers. So, okay, so what I'm saying, knowing these master,
I have more.
okay, these masters I've known, I'm a descendant of masters. One time I asked Genesis, I'm like, Genesis, P-Orridge, you go all over the world, like all these, like you're like fucking invented industrial music with Monty Kazaza. Like you people like are like they have like visions that are exalted by you. I'm like, you go and you meet all these like amazing creative people. Are there more? Is there like the next Genesis or the next stage? Are there like people like pushing the envelope past what you've done?
Worthy peers of the next generation.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what I've done is there's someone taking it to the next level. We used to talk about like the underground or whatever, visionaries. Mm-hmm. Well, those words are out of usage. So I said, Jen, like, is there another Genesis? Is there another Leyba? She's like, no, you're the only one.
So is this why you often reference a dead or dying culture? Or would there be other reasons behind that?
Well,
like the fact that there isn't a next whatever.
I don't know if it's
a next whoever. Like, isn't that indicative
I'd
of
like
a
to be
dying
optimistic.
culture? Really? That is a huge surprise to me. Like,
yeah, because there's cycles. The problem is not the dying culture. It's the problem of the worshiping a stillborn culture. And like you're talking about Arrested Development, America's like, it played out that fucking dead horse that kept beating the youth horse. Yeah,
right.
There's some new shit coming.
Right, and I personally think that you can actually tell a lot about a particular culture or civilization as to like what age group it respects the most. I mean, there is a reason why most cultures say you should respect your elders, because they lived in a harder time. They were around longer, and like now, like not only do people want the youth, like if we, I swear, like if the United States or the whole world discovered a way to keep our bodies like 30, people would perpetually want to have a personality of somebody who's like 20. And the insight of somebody who's like 16. No, but do you agree with that or disagree with that?
No, I agree with it. America's pedophilic. They sexualize it. I mean, going down to like even fucking infants. Literally.
Okay. Would you like to clarify on that?
And this culture of the United States, it's baby land. Think of it as babyland, you know.
What is infantile about it?
The superficialness of it. There's no.
Okay,
well,
so the
I think
superficiality.
Well, beyond that, I think the thing is, I think is like funny and sad, is, you know, United States, the individual, the maverick. The entrepreneur. Nah, not anymore, baby. Game over.
No, and that's the thing. That's really insidious too.
Except for your baby.
Well, that's the thing that really gets me, is because I think that being an American, it used to mean a lot of admirable things, like, you know, like an innovation in not only technology. That's all everybody thinks about now, but like we're actually seriously neglecting art and music. Like I've said before, like the utilitarians of the world are devaluing the artists, philosophers, and musicians, composers of the world, because they understand how to keep life going, and they understand what aids survival, but they do not understand what makes survival itself worth pursuing.
Thank you. I think about that all the time. I have this conversation with a lot of people. I've had this conversation with LaVey. So,
what insights did he have to offer you in such conversations?
His insights were the same insights I'm getting from medicine men that I've spent time with, who bowed out of the politics.
And you also were pretty. I mean, you're too young to be like a member of like the AIM, like the American Indian Movement, but you actually had a lot of close ties, right, with some pretty high ups in that movement.
Billy War Soldier. John Trudell was a big influence, and you know, I tried not to take it personal, but he was like reluctant to like associate with me in public, and I didn't understand it till recently, because I think he didn't want the federal heat to come down on me hard like they did when they murdered his family.
Okay, so he was actually doing that out of love, not out of cowardice.
Nope, because I found this out afterwards. So,
okay.
2 stories. One, my friend Tracy's hanging out with an Indian friend, and that she'd go to Sundance with, and like she's got like a photo book of like powwows, and Tracy's looking through it, and there's a picture of me with John Trudell on Alcatraz. 30th anniversary of Alcatraz.
Holy shit.
Yep, in 1999. So, and then after Trudell died, my friend Judy said, like, you know, Trudell like turned me on to your painting and your poetry. So for Trudell to call me a poet, because I wouldn't, you know, people have called me a shaman or a poet, and those are words that I wouldn't call myself.
Well, is it because you feel that these words once actually meant something of profundity, but have been like shat on by?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
yep.
The people who don't understand language itself and how important it is, and that's why no culture should forbade words, but they should also respect words.
And I've been a whole
You've been an advocate of intent, like
exactly.
because it's not about it's not necessarily about the words you use. It's about what you mean when you say them.
Exactly. That's what Burroughs meant when he said language is a virus. And I said, like, artists, musicians, writers need to take back the language around their craft, their masters. So the Western world, when they stole the art world away from Paris and brought it to New York City, they took the language away from the artists, just like they did with the indigenous people in North America.
I hate to bring up like to be like super salient, like a kind of a cheat card here. Orwell, Huxley, Newspeak. You did talk about Newspeak. Were you a big fan of Orwell or Huxley or both? Or?
Yeah, but they were both insiders, so they're kind of double dealers, especially like.
Why do you believe
Huxley.
that?
I mean, their origin. Like Huxley, one of his relatives was like. God, I don't. I found this out recently.
But he had so many salient points.
Because he knew this was happening. Right, he predicted the whole genetics.
So were you saying, do you think that he was a person with ill intent toward the people around him?
No. He had dubious relatives that were part of the control grid, as Burroughs would say.
So you would say with somebody like Huxley, right? Not Orwell, but like you would say with Huxley that he was he had good intentions and he did help the general populace by giving them information.
Yeah.
But
I don't have any malice towards him.
Right, and he could have helped more if he wasn't like stifled by those people you're talking about.
Right, and he could be dead, like Martin Luther King, or JFK, or Robert Kennedy.
So you think that Huxley may be dead for the same reason?
No, I'm saying like he kind of gave as much information as he could, and not like commit suicide over it. Now, if you look at like Freud, what was it? His was his nephew? He like invented human relations.
Can you clarify?
Okay, so you guys can look it up. So the guy that invented human relations, mind control, crowd control, advertising, and where we are now, went down another path. Where I think Freud wanted to liberate, just like Huxley and Orwell, and the powers that be took it to fucking control. And that was my criticism with a lot of Satanists, where they're like the herd, like ordinary people, the herd. When I had the falling out with the Church of Satan, with the Gilmorians, it was like
it's funny too, like how he calls them Gilmorians and not LaVeyans, because you feel that like there is a very solid distinction between the two.
Right, and one of the things that I noticed was when Gilmore turned into a control freak was LaVey would say the productive elite. Mm-hmm. We are the Satanists. We are the productive elite.
And he removed the productive part. Yeah.
We're the elite. I'm like, yeah.
And you also, in previous conversations, you had talked to me about how he removed that, and how that may be the fall of the COS, and why the Church of Satan is actually far more salient to modern day and the problems of our times than the Church of Satan, because all of the leftovers from the Church of Satan don't really do LaVey, who is actually a decent person, any justice.
Well,
if he were alive, would you say like a lot of people would use the phrase rolling in his grave?
Yeah, but LaVey could laugh it off. I asked him about Aquino one time, and he had a big falling out with Aquino. Aquino was like second in command forever, and he started the Temple of Set, and I was like, well, and it was just me and him, and we're on the street just parking his car. I was like, well, what's your view now of Aquino? Aquino just passed away recently, about a year ago, I think. He's like, well, he's just doing his thing.
So no ill intent at all. He was just like...
No, because it was, it seemed very kind of Christian to me, but I was like, I get it, because you don't want to hold on to it. But the thing...
But then Zena LaVey, his child, became a Setian, right? Or am I...
Yeah, now she's been a Buddhist for 20 years.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Okay. Talk about a spiritual journey, but okay.
So going back to Gilmore, the thing like that, in my, knowing, I was friends with Gilmore too. I probably spent more time with Gilmore than LaVey. Gilmore told me the stories. Like, Peggy and I are in San Francisco, and we're staying at the Black House, and it was first night. Like, we're like, hey, where should we go to eat? And LaVey goes, Olive Garden.
Oh my God.
Right. So Gilmore was like, no, that's fucking bourgeois. It's fucking stupid,
have to
nasty.
I have to agree with him on that.
I agree too. But my point being, like, Gilmore didn't understand LaVey's humor. Okay, so the second night, hey, where should we go to dinner? Guess what LaVey said? They should go for dinner.
Olive Garden.
Exactly. But he was fucking with Peter, and Peter didn't know. And I'm like, I knew LaVey enough to know, you're telling me the story, Peter. You didn't fucking get it. So he was like...
I think that also, I get that humor. And that's...
it's a New York thing.
Well, it's not specifically a New York
right,
thing, but I talked about the fact that there is a New York and Jewish connection between like attitudes and everything, and that's a very Jewish personality.
So it seemed like LaVey was pulling out the Jewish like poopy stick, and fucking Gilmore
poking him in the ass with it.
Didn't fucking understand. So it was like whatever, and like my fucking animosity towards Gilmore is like more of like disappointment. When he told me he was writing the Satanic Scriptures, I thought he was writing new material, and he was just republishing stuff from the Black Flame. So when he started telling me what I can and cannot do and who I can speak with in LA in 2006, I follow your satanic leader was my mantra at the performance, and all these
Really?
Yeah, and all these like clergy of the COS were like, follow your satanic leader. I'm like,
really?
yes.
Wow.
Kid you not.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Did Amy give you a copy of the 666 Eve?
No.
It's on there. I'll find my copy.
That's extremely disturbing.
Yeah. How so?
Well, no, because like it doesn't do justice to the movement itself, because obviously it was sort of like a poetic and artistic kind of rebellion against establishments, and saying like, look, we don't want leaders. We don't want leaders.
Exactly.
We want influencers maybe, but we don't want leaders.
I have like animosity towards that word because it's such a...
Well, yeah, but I mean,
word,
like,
yeah.
but when but when he died in 1997, that word didn't mean what it means now.
Right, and LaVey called himself a symbolic leader, not a leader, but a symbolic leader. But you got to understand, like, organizations like AIM, COS, they're on the fucking government payroll. Fucking AIM has been a government organization since like the late 70s. So COS, I mean, how do you think like fucking Peter and Peggy bought their house in Poughkeepsie? They're on the fucking government payroll.
Yeah, Poughkeepsie's expensive. Yeah. But and he, I never met Peter Gilmore.
He talks like this. Oh, Marly.
You kind of make him sound like a retarded Kermit the Frog, like.
Not like a Peter Lorre, yeah.
But do you think that do you think the Satanic Temple is kind of going in a better and more respectable direction, or do you have some reservations about that too?
Well, it was a W.C. Fields said, I don't want to be part of any organization that would have me as a member.
I thought that was Groucho Marx, but
right. Yeah, I've heard it, like, to both.
It doesn't matter. It's still a salient point. Yeah.
The point being, they're doing good work, and their legal stuff is amazing, fighting for like reproductive rights. So there's no point to join. I've never joined. I didn't join the Church of Satan. LaVey like made me a priest, and I accepted. So I have very fortunate to have friends in the TST. And they're doing great work. You know, there's the legal faction, there's the gray faction. Do you know about the gray faction?
No.
So, I only just recently discovered it. So the gray faction's going after, there's a whole movement in psychiatry to deal with and bring back the whole satanic repressed memories. So in psychiatry, they're specifically trying to bring back the satanic panic. So they're actively like activists against that, to the point of like litigation and everything. So it's like they're fucking necessary. It doesn't even matter what my opinion is. They're doing important work that I can't do. So kudos, you know.
Right, and do you want to work with them maybe? Or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to be part of the rally here in Salt Lake City on Saturday, but there's other things in the work for next year, and I definitely write some speeches and work with them and be a public figure. There's people that have a problem with that, I guess, in the organization, and then there's people that have a problem with me using the Baphomet, like the LaVey Baphomet, because they have their own Baphomet, so all this silly stuff. But I, like with the COS, I'm working with people that I see have a vision, and we can help each other and do some amazing creative
and the obsession with symbols that basically mean the same things. That's a disturbing
like
thing. No, because
religion,
then it's like you know, Satan Incorporated, like against Satan Corp. You know.
Yeah. Who loves you, dirty Satan? Who's gonna see you through the night?
Well, so. Do you have any even vague predictions for maybe the next decade?
It's horrible.
Really?
Yep. In the best ages, like, look at where Spain was, Dark Ages, and then into the Renaissance. It seems like the United States is like Spain, and we're stuck in the, you know, we got some inquisitions. And some...
Oh, so you actually see, like, people being inquisitive again?
Finally! No, the best part of human evolution and culture and progress were at the same time when there was, like, great opposition. You know, we're talking about, like, a movement, talk about Martin Luther King, the Kennedys.
Yeah, and actually the most horrible parts of history were the parts that had with very little opposition.
Right, so you have all this energy put in this, so it's like, it's going to be horrible and fucking phenomenal at the same time. And the thing is, like, not everybody's going to make it. You know, with what's been going on in the past year, people want to die because they don't know why they're alive. And going back to what you said, with like music and art, that's a reason to want to be alive, and that is more freeing than fucking like religion.
Really, you know,
well, people like look to religion, but religion's a control grid. So look to your scientists, not your corporate scientists. Look to your actual independent scientists and your independent doctors and your fucking composer friends, your painter friends, because this is our time now to grab the mantle. This is like the new Renaissance. I mean, like next step, Renaissance squared. And not everybody's going to get it.
Cubed.
Nah, squared.
Ad infinitum.
Yeah. No.
Let's hope so.
I don't like cubes. I hated the Rubik's Cube.
And we've also done some work together, me as a musician and him as a poet, because, I mean, you're not a musician, but you're very good with words. Call me a musician. I've been very lucky to work with great musicians like yourself, and you are great. You're a master, and I can hear music, and I've been able to work with musicians for like 30 years. It's a beautiful thing. You have to trust your visionaries. Come on, you know,
If I was like, slimmer and a lot younger and female, and I could jump around in blueberry bikinis, hey, I'd give that to you. I can still give it to you. But you got to trust your masters. Masters.
Okay.
That's what.
But okay, but what you're saying now could be misconstrued, like, because it does seem that you have, like leaders. How would you define the difference between a leader and a master? Because you're obviously not talking about like Southern slavery, like 19th century shit. Like you're talking about something completely different.
I'm a descendant of...
Do you mean like masters like Dali, Picasso, Beethoven, Mozart, Mahler, Tchaikovsky?
Exactly, and I am a descendant of masters of...
In spirit, yeah.
No, in actuality. Giger, Surrealism, Giger with Dali. I don't know if you know this, but one of my teachers, his teacher was an apprentice to Rodin, the sculptor. So I'm a descendant of Rodin, the master sculptor. So that way, yes, the master artist. And I see being a descendant of the occult through LaVey and through Genesis P-Orridge.
And you also have your own native, like, it's like, I know that like the Native American religions aren't exactly occult, but there's certainly a lot of overlap, wouldn't you think really?
Yeah, the Native American church, the Peyote Church, is Christian, and that's very much
right. Yeah. So it looks like my battery's running pretty
my
down.
Alcohol
but
content is running out. So what the hell, Marly? What the fuck are we gonna do?
I think we can leave that to another conversation. I just had a lot of questions that I wanted to answer because I didn't know like if you'd ever been adequately interviewed. Like I feel like there's a lot of things that you have to say that sometimes you don't feel right saying it without being asked. It's like the world's not asking you anything because they don't think anything anybody has to say is fucking worth anything anymore.
What I usually do...
It's the end of innovation, it almost feels like,
And it's very much intentional. What I like to do when people ask me, like, what's your favorite color? And I'm like, well, Giger was, like, great painter. And because he did the movie, so I, like, answer a question that I feel like they should ask me,
Okay, so do you think as an interviewer that I did all right?
You did great. I don't get asked questions that I want to be asked, and I'm like very humbled and very honored that you actually asked the real questions because I'm not used to. Usually like sometimes I'll do an interview and they're like, "Well, come up with the questions."
I'm with you, brother, because I do feel that I used to think that people are not asking the right questions, but now I would just like, I really hope they ask the wrong questions because they're not even asking questions anymore.
Right.
And
it used to be like they were afraid to ask the wrong questions because they might get murdered or suicided, but now they're afraid to ask the wrong questions or the right questions or real questions because they might not get enough likes, and it'd be bad for their careers. So
extra bad for their self-esteem.
Yeah, I think it's a mental health problem.
Yeah, and it's actually a mental health problem that is legitimately contagious because you do feel that like if nobody knows you, you're not worth a damn, and
right. And I have a great presence with all my artwork online, but then I'm going to our videos and there's like 4 views or something.
Right.
That's got to be intentional. I'm like, I must have said the wrong thing at a banquet.
So you think that it might be like a deliberately set algorithmic problem?
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely. Yeah. I think people are too lazy to be personal.
Well, at least at this point in history, I mean, barring anything happening, we want to do a podcast together where a lot of the times, maybe not all the time, but we want to interview other people.
Absolutely. Got a whole list.
And if you have something salient to say, we would like to hear you, and even more so than us, we would like other people to hear it because we don't want to be snake oil salesmen or people who push disinformation. particularly not deliberately. And I just think there's so much of that about, and there's so much lack of questioning.
Question authority, that's what I was taught. Like, I'm interested in people of ideas and creators, people creating. You can contact me at Leyba Arts, 2 A's, Leyba, Leyba, ART @gmail.com.
And do you have a Patreon?
Talk. Yes, yep. Stephen Johnson Leyba, Patreon.
And I endorse that. I think that brilliant thinkers and people who are innovators, the culture, like, ubiquitously, like all around the world, internationally, it's more and more under attack. Like, we're being implored by the powers that be, telling us, just be entertained, forget about everything else, and don't think about the chains of debt. Don't think of you are what you own.
It's the corporate model, basically.
Right.
Corporations
you are what
have gotten
you own.
so big.
What you own is the value of your being.
But it's gotten so bad with multinationals. It's like they want to own.
Not your artistic or analytical put-out.
They want to control all content and all intellectual property that comes out of and created by anybody. It's the multinational corporations. They've gotten so big.
So share.
So big.
Share and like, and repost, because I believe that this really in the long run doesn't just help us. I think it helps humanity as a whole.
Exactly. We're talking about world culture.
And we're talking about, like, people talk about the end of the world. Well, I would say a more horrifying thing is where we're forced to live on and just be debt slaves. And it's a world, it's the end of the world that's worth living in. Beauty is dead. Do you want to live in a world like that? Because beauty is dead, love is dead, nobody has human connection anymore.
Exactly.
We are being driven to our own death by our own hand.
They
by our own hand.
Jump off that bridge.
They force you, like, why are you hitting yourself? It's like, why are you slitting your wrist? Why are you slitting your wrist? Why are you blowing your brains out? Yeah, it's fucked up.
Is that what totalitarianism is all about? Fucking boring. Take your totalitarianism and shove it in your gaznoga. Bah! Bah! Gaznoga!
Is that a real Yiddish word, or you just make that up?
Thank you, yes. New Yiddish.
Okay. So, for the annals of history...
Annals of history.
Stephen Johnson Leyba. And from the depths of obscurity, Marly Preston.
Live on. Do you know why you're alive? Support the arts. Believe in yourself. Politicians,